There's a specific kind of exhaustion that productivity advice cannot address. Not the exhaustion of doing too much, though that is real and it is present. A deeper exhaustion. The exhaustion of doing too much in service of something that was never genuinely yours to serve. Of organizing your time, your energy, your attention, your most fundamental sense of daily purpose around a set of demands and expectations and metrics of success that were designed not maliciously, but systematically and with complete indifference to your particular interior life, to serve something other than the flourishing of the human being living inside them. Gabor Maté was direct about this in a way that most psychological frameworks are not. He said that many of the conditions he treated across decades of clinical work, the chronic illness, the depression, the addiction, the burnout, the specific quality of suffering that resists every individual level intervention because its source is not individual, could not be fully understood without understanding the cultural and systemic context in which they were being produced. That the question of why a particular person was suffering could not be honestly answered without also asking what kind of society had organized the conditions in which that suffering became predictable. This is not a political video. It is not a critique organized around any particular ideology or any particular prescription for how the system should be differently arranged. It is something more personally immediate than any of that. It is an honest account of what happens in a human being in the specific, interior, physiological, psychological, deeply personal reality of a human being when they spend years or decades organizing their life around the demands of systems that were designed with no particular concern for the flourishing of the soul doing the organizing. And it is an account of what becomes available when that organizing finally, genuinely stops. Not stops in the sense of dramatic withdrawal or refusal or the various forms of performance that sometimes accompany conversations like this one. Stops in the much quieter, more personal, more practically significant sense of a person who has finally distinguished between what the system requires and what the genuine self actually needs, and who has begun in the daily ordinary choices that constitute a life to let that distinction inform what they do and how they do it and why. That distinction is what today is genuinely about. Before we go further into what it looks like when the obeying stops, something honest needs to be said about what the obeying actually is, because it is rarely experienced as obedience. That is not how it presents itself in the interior life of the person doing it. It presents itself as simply the way things are, as the obvious, unquestionable, practically necessary arrangement of a life in a world that has specific requirements for participation, as maturity, as responsibility, as the reasonable adult's acceptance of the constraints within which a functional life must be built. Gabor Maté observed that this naturalizing of the system's demands, this experience of external requirement as simply the inevitable shape of reality rather than as a specific set of choices made by specific people serving specific interests, is one of the most psychologically significant features of the contemporary experience of living inside large institutional and economic systems, because it makes the cost of the compliance invisible. Not because the cost is not real, because the cost is so consistently and so reliably attributed to individual inadequacy, your inability to manage stress better, your failure to practice sufficient self-care, your personal difficulty with work-life balance, rather than to the genuine source, which is a system whose demands on human attention, energy, time, and fundamental orientation toward life were designed without meaningful reference to what human beings actually require to genuinely flourish. The cost is real. It shows up in the body, in a nervous system that is chronically dysregulated, not because of individual psychological deficiency, but because it was not designed to operate under the continuous low-grade activation that contemporary economic life consistently produces. in the relationships that suffer, not because the people in them do not care enough, but because the system's demands on their time and attention leave genuinely insufficient room for the quality of presence that genuine relationship requires. In the creative impulse, the contemplative capacity, the specific quality of interior spaciousness that the human mind requires for genuine insight and genuine meaning-making, consistently crowded out by the urgent and the productive and the measurable and the immediately economically relevant. Gabor Maté traced these costs with clinical precision, and he was clear about what they indicate: not personal failure, systemic misalignment, the specific, predictable, well-documented consequence of organizing a human life primarily around the demands of systems that were optimized for economic output rather than human flourishing, and then treating the resulting suffering as evidence of the individual's psychological inadequacy rather than the system's genuine unsustainability for the beings it is requiring to operate within it. So what does the day you stop obeying actually look like? It does not look like quitting everything. It does not look like a dramatic public declaration of independence from the systems that have been organizing the life. It does not look like any of the various performed rebellions that the culture offers as substitutes for genuine interior freedom. The conspicuous consumption of wellness products, the social media announcement of boundaries, the curated presentation of a life that has been reorganized around authenticity while remaining beneath its new aesthetic, organized around the same fundamental concern with external approval that organized everything before it. The genuine day of stopping is considerably quieter than any of those things, and considerably more personal. It is the day, or more accurately, the specific, ordinary, unremarkable moment within a day when a person notices, perhaps for the first time with full, honest clarity, the gap between what they are doing and why they are doing it, between the genuine self's actual sense of what matters and the system's account of what should matter, between the life being lived and the life that would be lived if the system's demands were not the primary organizing principle. Noticing that gap is not comfortable. Gabor Maté was clear about this. The person who genuinely sees the gap, who allows themselves to feel the full reality of the distance between the life the system requires and the life the genuine self needs, that person is not immediately relieved. They are initially more uncomfortable than before the noticing. Because noticing the gap creates a responsibility that not noticing did not create, the responsibility of genuine choice, the responsibility of no longer being able to claim with full honesty that the life being lived is simply the inevitable result of circumstances rather than the accumulated outcome of choices that could in principle be made differently. This is the moment Gabor Maté identified as the most significant in the process of genuine psychological and spiritual liberation from systemic compliance. Not the moment of dramatic action, the moment of genuine seeing. Because genuine seeing, honest, clear, undefended acknowledgement of what is actually happening and what it is actually costing is the precondition for genuine choice. And genuine choice, even when it is exercised in very small and very undramatic ways, is the beginning of the reorganization of a life around something other than the system's requirements. What does that reorganization actually require, and what does it actually produce? It requires first the development of a genuine capacity for discernment between what the system requires and what the genuine self actually needs. This sounds straightforward. It is genuinely difficult in practice, because the system's requirements and the genuine self's needs are not always in complete opposition. Many of what the system asks for is genuinely reasonable and genuinely compatible with genuine flourishing. The difficulty is in developing the interior sensitivity to distinguish between the demands that are genuinely compatible and the demands that are not, between the obligations that can be met without significant cost to the authentic interior life and the obligations that consistently, reliably, at a cost that accumulates over time, crowd out what actually matters. This discernment cannot be developed to analysis alone. It requires the cultivation of what Gabor Maté consistently identified as the most important and most consistently neglected capacity in contemporary life: genuine, honest, non-managed attention to the body's signals. The specific felt sense of aliveness or deadness that different activities and obligations and directions produce. The quality of energy that is generated versus depleted by different investments of time and attention. The body knows, consistently and honestly, the difference between what serves the genuine self and what serves the system at the genuine self's expense. And the body's knowing is available, has always been available, to anyone willing to attend to it honestly, rather than managing it into the silence that the system's demands require. It requires, alongside the development of discernment, the specific courage of acting on what the discernment reveals, even in small ways, even in ways that are invisible to the surrounding world. The choice to spend a particular morning on what is genuinely meaningful, rather than on what is merely urgent. The choice to decline an obligation that is genuinely incompatible with what the genuine self needs, rather than accepting it out of the habituated compliance that has been mistaken for responsibility. The choice to bring genuine presence to a relationship, rather than the managed, partially attended to quality of engagement that the system's demands and attention so consistently produce. These choices do not require the dramatic reorganization of external circumstances. They do not require the abandonment of legitimate obligations or the performance of countercultural identity. They require only the daily, ordinary, consistently practiced willingness to let the genuine self's actual sense of what matters have some genuine influence on how the actual day is actually lived. And what this produces, gradually, genuinely, without the drama of sudden transformation, is something Gabor Maté observed with remarkable consistency in the people who had genuinely made this shift. Not the spectacular life, not the Instagram-worthy reorganization of circumstances around authenticity and purpose. Something quieter and more durable than that. A different quality of presence in the life actually being lived. A different quality of energy, not more energy in the simple sense, but energy that is more genuinely available for what matters, because less of it is being chronically consumed in the management of the misalignment between the genuine self and the system's demands. A different quality of relationship with time, less organized around the future accomplishment that will finally justify the present sacrifice, more genuinely inhabiting the actual present. A different quality of physical health, the body no longer required to absorb quite as much of the cost of the chronic systemic misalignment, gradually becoming less the carrier of the suppressed authentic self's suppressed authentic experience. These changes are not guaranteed. Gabor Maté never dealt in guarantees. They are the realistic, clinically observed, practically available consequences of a genuine and sustained shift in the fundamental organizing principle of a human life, from what the system requires to what the genuine self actually needs. And the shift begins not with any external action, but with the one thing that every genuine shift in a human life has always begun with: the honest, clear, undefended willingness to see what is actually happening, to feel what it is actually costing, to acknowledge, without immediately reaching for the management of that acknowledgement, that the life as currently organized is not fully the life the genuine self was formed to live. That acknowledgement, made honestly, in private, without performance, and without the demand that it immediately produce a plan, is the day the obeying stops. Not in the world, in the interior life, where all genuine change has always actually begun. And the privilege of a lifetime, genuinely, not as a closing formula, but as the honest conclusion of everything that comes before it, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. not who the system requires, not who the economic arrangement of contemporary life rewards, not who the accumulated compliance of years of organizing around external demands has gradually, without any single decisive moment of departure, produced who you truly are, which has been present throughout, beneath every compliance, beneath every managed accommodation to what was required, beneath every choice made from the system's logic rather than the genuine self's actual knowing. Present, genuine, waiting with the specific patience of something that has never stopped being real for the day the obeying stops. That day is available to you. It begins with honest seeing. And it has always been closer than the system wanted you to believe.